Imagine, if you will, the soft, diffused light of a distant morning in the mid-18th century, a time when the world seemed to turn at a more languid pace. Across a vast, unbroken expanse of the Atlantic, 13 distinct colonies lay nestled along the eastern seaboard of a new continent. Each possessed its own unique character, a tapestry woven with the threads of diverse landscapes and individual spirits. From the bustling mercantile harbors of the north to the sprawling agricultural estates of the south, the air itself seemed to carry the scent of possibility, mingling with the earthy aroma of fertile soil and the clean tang of the sea. For nearly 2 centuries, these colonies had flourished, steadily cultivating a way of life that, while deeply rooted in British tradition, was subtly evolving into something uniquely American. The rhythms of their days were often dictated by the quiet industry of manual labor, the steady hand of the farmer guiding his plow, the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the diligent stitch of the seamstress's needle. Evenings unfolded under the comforting glow of hearth fires, where families gathered, their voices a soft murmur in the stillness, recounting the day's gentle labors or sharing hushed stories of their English heritage. The bond with Great Britain, the venerable mother country, was long perceived as a natural and comforting connection, like an ancient, sturdy oak tree providing shade and shelter. Colonists cherished their identity as loyal subjects of the crown, valuing the deeply ingrained English rights and liberties that were understood to be their birthright. These were the freedoms enshrined in historical documents like Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights, assurances of fair representation, protection from arbitrary power, and the right to live under laws to which they had consented. There was a profound, almost unconscious sense of belonging, a shared narrative of a vast interconnected empire. Yet, as the years drifted by, like leaves gently falling from an autumn tree, a subtle disquiet began to settle upon the colonial spirit. It was not a sudden storm, but rather a gradual dimming of the harmonious light that had once shone so brightly. Whispers of discontent, at first faint and scattered like the first drops of rain, began to travel from town to town, carried on the very breezes that rustled through the tall grasses. These weren't shouts of anger, but rather murmurs of unease, born from decisions made far away in London, across the vast and unpredictable ocean. Decisions that seemed to disregard the daily realities, the quiet expectations, and the deeply held convictions of those who had built their lives and cultivated their communities in this distant land. The long shadow of empire, once a source of reassuring protection and stability, was now starting to feel a little heavy, a little less benign. New regulations, often perceived as burdensome, began to chafe against the colonists' growing sense of self-sufficiency. Taxes, imposed without the gentle consultation that colonists had grown accustomed to through their own elected assemblies, started to prick at their sense of justice. It was a subtle friction, like a steady, gentle current, slowly eroding a riverbank, slowly. The once clear, comforting understanding of their place within the grand imperial design began to blur, introducing a delicate tension into the otherwise peaceful flow of colonial existence. As the sun dipped below the horizon each day, painting the skies in hues of lavender and muted gold, the colonists carried these quiet concerns, like a soft, persistent hum, into the stillness of the night, wondering if the harmony of their world was indeed fading.
As the colonial almanacs turned their pages through seasons of growth and harvest, the gentle hum of discontent, once barely perceptible, began to grow a little more distinct, though still far from a discordant roar. News, though traveling slowly by sailing ship across the vast Atlantic, and then by weary rider over winding colonial roads, carried a weight that increasingly settled upon the American spirit. From the dignified chambers of Parliament in London, policies and directives drifted across the sea like gathering clouds, their shadows subtly altering the familiar landscape of daily life for the colonists. The costly triumph of the French and Indian War, fought to secure the empire's dominion over vast North American territories, had left Great Britain with a heavy burden of debt. In an understandable effort to replenish its coffers and strengthen its control, Parliament began to enact new measures designed to integrate the colonies more firmly into the imperial system and ensure their financial contribution. At first, these were perceived as minor adjustments, easily absorbed into the rhythm of daily life. Perhaps a new customs duty here, or a slight alteration to a trade regulation there. But then came the more significant measures, ones that touched the very fabric of colonial self-governance and economic well-being. The Stamp Act, introduced in 1765, was indeed like a pebble dropped into a calm pond. Yet its ripples expanded far more widely and deeply than many in London anticipated. It placed a tax on nearly every piece of printed paper used in daily life, from legal documents and contracts to playing cards and advertisements. Imagine the quiet inconvenience, the small yet pervasive cost added to countless everyday transactions, gradually accumulating into a larger, more profound sense of grievance. The colonists, long accustomed to their own elected assemblies deciding matters of taxation, felt this imposition deeply. It was not merely the money, it was the fundamental principle of direct taxation without their consent or representation in the body imposing it. A gentle yet firm voice inside them began to whisper, then articulate more clearly, "No taxation without representation," a phrase that steadily wove itself into their quiet conversations and public discourse. Though the Stamp Act was eventually repealed, a testament to the power of persistent collective protest and widespread economic boycotts, its brief existence had etched a lasting memory. It had shown the colonists that their united voices, when raised with calm determination, could indeed be heard and even influence the distant seat of power. Yet it had also revealed a stark and unsettling divergence in perception. London viewed the colonies primarily as subordinate entities existing to serve the interests of the empire, while the colonists increasingly saw themselves as distinct societies possessing inherent rights that could not be easily brushed aside by a distant legislative body. Further acts followed, like the Townshend Acts, placing duties on imported goods such as tea, glass, and paper. These too met with resistance, a quiet yet firm refusal to comply that gently undermined imperial authority and fostered a growing sense of alienation. Each new measure, each new friction point served as a quiet lesson, gently guiding the colonies toward a clearer understanding of their own collective strength and their growing estrangement from the traditional bonds of the mother country. Through it all, the daily routines of colonial life continued. Children played in sun-dappled yards, artisans crafted their wares with diligent hands, farmers tilled their fields under the watchful sun. But within the quiet moments, a new understanding was slowly blossoming, a gentle yet profound awareness that the harmonious relationship of generations past was subtly, irrevocably changing. The echoes from across the ocean were no longer simply directives. They were questions, profound questions that invited quiet contemplation and eventually a deeply unsettling reevaluation of their identity and their future. The widening rift, though still traversed by ships and letters, began to feel vast and daunting.
The years continued their steady march, each one bringing a subtle yet undeniable intensification of the colonial predicament, like the slow, deliberate gathering of heavy clouds on a summer afternoon before a distant storm. The initial murmurs of discontent had deepened into more sustained and earnest conversations, often held in hushed tones in the flickering candlelight of taverns, within the dignified drawing rooms of prominent citizens, or exchanged through carefully penned letters carried by weary riders across the vast colonial landscape. The once comforting relationship with Great Britain now felt less like a gentle embrace and more like a slowly tightening grip, firm, unyielding, and occasionally chilling. Moments of stark clarity began to punctuate the everyday rhythm of colonial life, standing out like somber markers on a winding path. The tragic events in Boston in 1770, where British soldiers, in a moment of escalating tension, fired into a crowd, leaving lives lost, sent a profound chill through the heart of the colonies. It was a moment of deep sadness, a visceral reminder of the fragility of peace when misunderstandings and perceived provocations reached a breaking point. Though perhaps an isolated incident in the grand scheme of an empire, its memory lingered, a somber shadow that whispered caution, mistrust, and a growing sense of vulnerability in the face of distant power. The contentious issue of tea, a comforting daily ritual for many, became a powerful symbol of the growing impasse between Parliament and the colonies. The Tea Act, designed ostensibly to aid the struggling British East India Company, was widely perceived by colonists not as a benevolent gesture, but as another insidious attempt to slyly enforce Parliament's right to tax them without their explicit consent. And so, on a quiet, moonlit evening in December 1773, a defiant and symbolic act of civil disobedience unfolded in Boston Harbor. Imagine the dark, cold waters, the gentle creaking of ships against the docks as chests of precious East India Company tea, a beloved commodity, were quietly, purposefully emptied into the depths of the sea. It was a silent, yet profoundly powerful rejection of distant authority, a statement made without words, but with unwavering resolve. Parliament's response to this bold act was swift, severe, and ultimately counterproductive, ushering in what the colonists swiftly dubbed the Intolerable Acts. These were punitive measures designed to bring Massachusetts, and by ominous extension, all the colonies, to their knees. The bustling port of Boston, a vital hub of trade and livelihood, was quietly closed, effectively strangling its economic heart. Local self-governance, a cherished aspect of colonial life, was severely curtailed, and British soldiers were to be quartered in private colonial homes, an unsettling and deeply unwelcome intrusion into the peaceful sanctity of family life. These acts were intended to isolate and crush dissent, to make an example of rebellious Massachusetts. But like a gentle breeze encountering a unified forest, they only served to draw the colonies closer together, fostering a profound sense of shared grievance. A common refrain began to emerge across the vast stretches of colonial America, not one of chaotic anger, but of shared concern and growing conviction. From the quiet farmlands of Pennsylvania to the bustling docks of New York, from the stately plantations of Virginia to the resilient fishing villages of New England, an understanding blossomed. Their fates were inextricably intertwined. The individual burdens and grievances of one colony were now seen as the shared concerns of all. As the days shortened and the air grew crisp with the approach of autumn, the First Continental Congress quietly convened in Philadelphia. This gathering of thoughtful minds representing diverse colonial interests was a profound testament to this emerging unity. They met not in a spirit of wild, uncontrolled revolution, but with a deep sense of gravity, searching for a path forward, weighing every option with meticulous care. The gentle storm was gathering, not with sudden thunder and jarring lightning, but with the quiet intensity of intelligent minds contemplating the most momentous decisions of their lives. The whispers of liberty, though still soft, were growing stronger, more insistent,
inviting them to consider a future entirely beyond the long, familiar shadow of empire.
Imagine the vibrant yet thoughtful atmosphere of Philadelphia in the summer of 1776, a time when the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Its cobblestone streets, though busy with the gentle sounds of daily life, seemed to carry an undercurrent of profound purpose. Elegant brick buildings, adorned with the quiet dignity of Georgian architecture, stood under the clear blue sky, their windows reflecting the steady light of a new era. The air, often warm and still, carried the subtle scents of blooming flowers from carefully tended gardens, mingling with the distant muted sounds of daily commerce and the soft rustle of leaves in shaded squares and verdant parks. It was here, within the venerable hallowed walls of the State House, later to be known as Independence Hall, that an extraordinary gathering of men convened, the Second Continental Congress. These individuals, representing the voices and aspirations of 13 distinct colonies, were not driven by haste or reckless passion. Rather, they were men of thoughtful contemplation, often learned lawyers, prosperous merchants, and influential planters, deeply rooted in the established traditions of their time. They understood, with a quiet solemnity, the profound gravity of the path they were now considering, a path that stretched into an uncertain, unknown future, far beyond the comforting familiarity of their established world. Their debates, though sometimes spirited and occasionally intense, were underpinned by a shared sense of immense responsibility, a quiet recognition of the weight of history resting gently upon their collective shoulders. For over a year, these delegates had patiently wrestled with the escalating tensions and increasingly bitter disagreements between the colonies and Great Britain. They had hoped, with sincere hearts, for a peaceful reconciliation, for a gentle return to a harmonious constitutional relationship under the British Crown. But with each passing month, like the steady ebb and flow of the tide, new evidence emerged that such hopes were gradually fading, dimming like the last rays of a long sunset. The King's unwavering pronouncements, the Parliament's uncompromising stance, and the steady, unwelcome march of British troops had collectively painted a clearer, more somber picture. The possibility of peaceful accord was all but gone. The echoes of musketry at Lexington and Concord, the tragic stand at Bunker Hill, these were no longer just distant reports, but somber realities. The words of Thomas Paine in his widely circulated pamphlet, Common Sense, had found their way into countless hands and hearts across the colonies. His clear, direct, and unadorned prose, patiently explaining the simple logic of self-governments, had a soothing yet profoundly powerful effect, like a gentle, steady rain on parched earth, nourishing the seeds of independence that had been quietly sown. He did not preach anger or incite chaos. Rather, he illuminated the natural order of things, that a vast and growing continent should not forever be governed by a distant island kingdom, but should determine its own destiny. As the days of June lengthened, bringing with them a sense of culmination and inevitability, the collective will of the Congress began to coalesce. On a quiet morning, June 7th, a distinguished delegate from Virginia, Richard Henry Lee, rose to present a resolution that eloquently articulated the growing consensus that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. It was a moment of profound significance, spoken not with thunderous rhetoric, but with the measured cadence of deep conviction, a statement that gently invited a new world into being. The serene birthplace of ideas was quietly preparing to usher in a new era. Imagine Thomas Jefferson, at the age of 33, a man of profound intellect and a quietly contemplative spirit, as he embarked upon the monumental task of drafting the Declaration of Independence. He was not known for booming oratory or public displays of passion, but rather for his reserved demeanor, his meticulous scholarship, and his extraordinary gift for elegant prose.
Picture him retreating from the gentle bustle and the fervent debates of the State House to the comparative solitude of his rented rooms on the second floor of a modest brick house on Market Street in Philadelphia. The world outside hummed with the daily rhythms of life, the distant cries of street vendors, the soft clopping of hooves on cobblestones. But within his quiet space, Jefferson immersed himself in the serene pursuit of translating abstract ideals into eloquent and enduring words. With a small, portable writing desk of his own ingenious design placed upon his lap and a quill pen poised over parchment, Jefferson began his profound work. The air in his room might have been still, perhaps sweetened by the scent of ink and aged paper. The only sound, the faint, rhythmic scratching of his pen as thoughts flowed from his mind onto the page. His genius lay not in inventing entirely new political concepts, but in his remarkable ability to synthesize, clarify, and articulate the powerful ideas that had been gently circulating and evolving within the intellectual currents of the Enlightenment for decades. He drew deeply from the wisdom of thinkers like John Locke, who spoke eloquently of natural rights, the inherent entitlements to life, liberty, and property, and the revolutionary idea that legitimate government derived its just power solely from the consent of the governed. These were not radical notions in their pure essence, but rather timeless principles of human dignity and self-determination, now being applied with a bold new purpose. Jefferson also wove in elements from Jean-Jacques Rousseau's concept of the social contract and Montesquieu's theories of governmental separation of powers, creating a tapestry of thought that was both familiar and profoundly innovative in its application. His first draft, composed with remarkable speed over a few intense days, was a true tour de force, a testament to his intellectual command and literary grace. It began with a preamble that would forever resonate with the spirit of humanity, a serene yet firm explanation for why it becomes necessary, in the gentle flow of human events, for one people to dissolve the political bonds connecting them to another. And then came the profound, immortal Declaration, words that would echo across centuries and continents. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These phrases were not a sudden, spontaneous outburst, but the carefully distilled essence of centuries of philosophical thought, presented with a quiet, undeniable clarity and a deeply resonant rhythm. The substantial middle section of the Declaration unfolded as a meticulously crafted bill of indictment against King George III. Jefferson cataloged a deliberate and exhaustive litany of grievances, each a clear example of the king's perceived tyranny and his systematic efforts to subtly erode the colonists' inherent rights and fundamental freedoms. Every point, from the imposition of taxes without colonial consent and the unwelcome quartering of British troops in private homes, to the obstruction of justice and the cutting off of vital colonial trade, served as a quiet yet powerful testament to the king's perceived disregard for the very principles he was sworn to uphold. It was a gentle, yet profoundly firm legal and moral argument for separation, meticulously laid out for the world to consider, a reasoned justification for an act of profound rebellion. There was one particularly poignant passage in Jefferson's original draft, a strong and impassioned condemnation of the slave trade. Though a slave owner himself, Jefferson understood the deep moral hypocrisy of fighting for liberty while perpetuating human bondage. His powerful denunciation of the king for forcing the execrable commerce upon the colonies, for violating the most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people, was a profound moral statement. However, in the delicate and often challenging dance of achieving unanimous agreement among the 13 diverse colonies, this particular clause, though morally compelling, was deemed too contentious. With a heavy heart, it was quietly removed during the subsequent revision process. It was a pragmatic compromise born of the immediate need for unity. Yet it left a quiet, lingering shadow on the document, a deferred reckoning with the nation's highest ideals that would stretch for decades. As Jefferson completed his work, gently presenting it to the Committee of Five, there was a sense of profound accomplishment, yet also the quiet anticipation of the momentous journey that still lay ahead. His quiet hand and eloquent pen had given resonant voice to the deepest aspirations of a continent, carefully weaving a tapestry of ideals that would softly illuminate the path to nationhood.
The parchment, bearing Thomas Jefferson's elegant script, now lay before the Committee of Five, a small, distinguished gathering of men entrusted with the delicate and profound task of refining the draft declaration. Imagine them in a quiet, sun-dappled room, perhaps with the gentle breeze of a Philadelphia summer afternoon drifting through an open window, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. The only sounds might have been the soft rustle of paper, the occasional thoughtful clearing of a throat, and the murmur of subdued discussion. This was not a moment for grandstanding or contentious argument, but for meticulous consideration, for the gentle polishing of words that would shape the very destiny of a new nation. Benjamin Franklin, with his calm, pragmatic wisdom and renowned gentle wit, would have offered his sage advice, perhaps suggesting a more concise phrase here, a more impactful word there, his mind always seeking clarity and persuasive power. John Adams, ever the passionate and unyielding advocate for liberty, would have ensured that the core principles of self-governance and inherent rights shone through with undeniable conviction. Roger Sherman, the quiet shoemaker and statesman, along with Robert Livingston, the distinguished New Yorker, would have contributed their pragmatic insights, ensuring the document resonated with the diverse political and economic interests of all the colonies, a testament to the need for broad appeal. Their collective work was a testament to the power of collaboration, a harmonious blend of individual intellect and shared intention. They sought to make the Declaration not just a political statement, but a timeless articulation of universal truths, ensuring its language would be both profound in its philosophical depth and accessible in its clarity. Each subtle alteration, each careful deletion or addition was made with the immense weight of history and the future in mind, a gentle yet purposeful sculpting of meaning and impact. One of the most significant and quietly wrenching deliberations centered around Jefferson's powerful clause condemning the slave trade. His original words were indeed forceful, a direct moral challenge to the deeply entrenched institution of slavery. Yet, as the committee understood, and as the larger Congress would later confirm, this condemnation, though morally compelling and philosophically consistent with the Declaration's ideals, was a point of deep and irreconcilable division, particularly for the southern colonies, whose economies were heavily dependent on enslaved labor. To secure the absolutely vital unanimous support necessary for a united front against the formidable British Empire, a difficult and deeply painful compromise was reached. The clause, with a heavy heart and a profound sense of political necessity, was gently removed. It was a pragmatic decision, born of the immediate need for unity to face a common foe, yet it left a quiet, lingering shadow on the parchment,
a deferred reckoning with the nation's highest ideals that would weigh heavily on future generations. As the Committee of Five completed its delicate work, they formally presented the revised draft to the full Continental Congress. Imagine the scene. The delegates gathered in the dignified, perhaps slightly stuffy chamber of the State House, listening intently as the refined words of the Declaration were read aloud. Each phrase would have been weighed, each sentence considered, not in a spirit of contentious debate alone, but with a deep sense of shared purpose and immense gravity. The discussion that followed was thorough and extensive, spanning several more days. It was a testament to the democratic process, a gentle yet rigorous unfolding of collective wisdom. There were further subtle adjustments, minor tweaks to ensure ultimate clarity, rhetorical power, and to reflect the broadest possible consensus among all 13 colonies. Yet the essential spirit, the profound philosophical core articulated by Jefferson, the unalienable rights, the consent of the governed, the right to revolution, remained beautifully and robustly intact. This process of gentle refinement underscored the extraordinary nature of the document. It was not the product of a single brilliant mind alone, but the carefully distilled and collaboratively forged voice of a united people, speaking with measured resolve and profound intention. As the final words were agreed upon, a quiet sense of momentous accomplishment settled over the chamber. A calm before the storm of public pronouncements. The Declaration was now truly ready, a beacon of measured hope and unwavering resolve, soon to be unveiled to a waiting and anxious world, ready to send its gentle but firm message across the seas.
The morning of July 2nd, 1776, unfolded with a subtle, almost imperceptible, shift in the atmosphere within the venerable State House in Philadelphia. The air, perhaps still and warm with the promise of a long summer day, carried a heightened sense of anticipation, a quiet hum of destiny about to be fulfilled. After weeks of earnest debate, deep individual reflection, and the delicate, arduous art of political compromise, the Continental Congress prepared to make its most profound and historically resonant decision. The path they had chosen was fraught with immense peril, but the gentle current of historical necessity now pulled them forward. When the vote was finally called upon Richard Henry Lee's resolution for independence, it passed with a quiet yet firm majority. 12 colonies affirmed their desire to sever ties with Great Britain, with only the delegates from New York abstaining, still awaiting further, though likely imminent, instructions from their provincial Congress. Imagine the profound solemnity of that moment, a hushed reverence as each delegate in turn cast their colony's vote, a gentle yet resolute declaration of intent that would echo through the ages. It was not a boisterous cheer or a sudden burst of joyous celebration that marked the occasion, but rather a shared sigh of collective commitment, a profound recognition of the irrevocable step they had just taken. John Adams, writing with fervent anticipation to his beloved wife Abigail that very evening, would later reflect on this day with a quiet awe, foreseeing its monumental significance for generations to come, though he slightly misjudged the precise date of future celebrations. However, the passage of the resolution for independence was only the first, albeit monumental, part of their task. The carefully crafted document itself, the Declaration of Independence, which meticulously articulated the philosophical justifications and the specific grievances against the Crown, still required final approval, word by deliberate word. For 2 more intense, yet ultimately peaceful days, the delegates immersed themselves in the refined text. They meticulously reviewed every single word, every resonant phrase, every precise clause. The summer heat in the chamber might have been oppressive.
the air thick with the scent of ink and parchment. Yet their focus remained unwavering, their dedication to clarity, precision, and rhetorical power absolute. The debates were thorough and exhaustive, a gentle yet rigorous probing of each sentence to ensure its strength, its resonance, and its undeniable persuasive power. They understood with a quiet solemnity that they were creating a document not only for the present moment, but for the vast sweep of history. A message addressed not just to their king, but to the entire world, and crucially, to future generations who would inherit the legacy of their courage. They sought a delicate balance between soaring, eloquent idealism and pragmatic, undeniable justification, ensuring that their arguments were both morally compelling and intellectually sound, a harmonious blend of heart and mind. Finally, late in the afternoon of July 4th, 1776, with the sun casting long, gentle shadows across the chamber floor, the Declaration of Independence was unanimously adopted by the Continental Congress. It was a moment less of grand spectacle and more of quiet, unified resolution. There was no immediate outpouring of public celebration within the hallowed hall itself, but rather a profound shared sense of purpose and quiet determination. These were men who understood the immense personal and collective risks they were taking, the sacred honor they were so solemnly pledging. Their unity, forged through patient dialogue, earnest debate, and thoughtful compromise, was their greatest strength, a testament to their collective resolve. The news of this adoption would soon begin its slow, deliberate journey outward. Carried by tireless riders across dusty roads and by sturdy sailing ships across the vast, unpredictable ocean, it would spread like a gentle ripple, subtly transforming minds and quietly igniting spirits. The bells of Philadelphia on July 8th would ring out with a joyous peal, publicly announcing the Declaration to an eager populace, inviting the people to embrace this new and momentous chapter in their history. But within the quiet confines of the State House on that fateful afternoon of July 4th, 1776, a new nation had been born, not with a sudden clamor, but with a firm, unanimous, and deeply thoughtful voice, setting forth its ideals for all the world to hear.
As the sun gently dipped below the horizon on that momentous July 4th, 1776, casting a warm, muted golden light across the rooftops and spires of Philadelphia, a profound and quiet transformation had silently occurred. The Declaration of Independence, carefully penned and meticulously refined, was now an official pronouncement, a serene yet immensely powerful assertion of a people's deepest aspirations. Its words, spoken softly at first within the State House, would soon begin to resonate, not with a jarring clamor, but with a steady, hopeful vibration that would spread across the 13 diverse colonies and eventually echo around the entire world. The first public readings of the Declaration were moments of quiet revelation and growing excitement, deeply moving for those who gathered to listen. Imagine the assembled crowds, perhaps on a warm, clear summer's day, standing under the open sky, listening intently as the eloquent words were read aloud, their voices carrying gently on the breeze. The phrase, "all men are created equal," would have settled in their hearts like a profound, self-evident truth, stirring a sense of hope, purpose, and a quiet validation of their own inherent worth. The long and detailed list of grievances against the king would have resonated deeply, validating their own feelings of injustice and oppression, transforming individual burdens into a collective story of shared suffering and a united cause. Cheers and the joyous pealing of bells would have followed, not in a chaotic frenzy, but in a wave of shared emotion, a collective recognition of a new dawn breaking over their lives. Bonfires would have been lit, illuminating the evening skies with a hopeful glow. The news then began its methodical and often arduous journey across the vast colonial landscape.
Tireless riders on horseback, pushing themselves and their mounts to their limits, carried precious printed copies of the Declaration, their efforts weaving a tapestry of information from bustling urban centers to remote, quiet farmsteads. Imagine the quiet joy, the thoughtful discussions as families gathered around their hearths in the evening, reading the momentous words by flickering candlelight, their faces etched with a blend of awe and apprehension. The document served not only as a crucial justification for the war already underway, but as a profound rallying cry, infusing moral weight and philosophical clarity into their arduous struggle. It touched the hearts of ordinary citizens, from simple farmers to skilled artisans, with a renewed sense of purpose, reminding them of the grand ideals for which they were now sacrificing so much: their peace, their property, and often their very lives. Beyond the shores of America, the Declaration embarked on its own quiet, momentous voyage carried by sturdy sailing ships across the unpredictable and often perilous Atlantic Ocean. It arrived, sometimes weeks later, in the sophisticated courts and intellectual salons of Europe, a beacon of radical thought in a world still largely dominated by established monarchies and entrenched aristocracies. French philosophers, already steeped in Enlightenment ideals and yearning for similar societal reforms, would have read its words with quiet admiration and a growing sense of shared intellectual kinship, recognizing in Jefferson's elegant prose a powerful kindred spirit. The Declaration subtly yet profoundly shifted the international perception of the American conflict, transforming it from a mere internal colonial rebellion into a principled struggle for universal human rights and self-government. This subtle yet crucial shift would prove instrumental in securing vital foreign aid, particularly from France, whose quiet diplomatic support and eventual crucial military assistance would become an indispensable factor in the American ultimate victory. The very act of signing the engrossed copy of the Declaration, which occurred primarily on August 2nd, was a moment of profound, quiet courage. Each delegate, as they approached the parchment and affixed their name, understood the immense personal risks involved. Their signatures were not just endorsements, they were solemn pledges, putting their lives, their personal fortunes, and their sacred honor unequivocally on the line. John Hancock's famously bold and prominent signature, placed front and center, became a powerful yet silent symbol of this collective defiance, forever etched into the annals of history and inspiring a quiet resolve in the hearts of those who looked upon it. The Declaration, born of quiet contemplation, rigorous debate, and immense courage, now began to gently reverberate through the world, not as a thunderous roar, but as a persistent, hopeful promise, a soft yet firm whisper of liberty that would echo through the generations, inviting all to listen and to dream of a more just future. The path to fully realizing the grand, luminous ideals articulated in the Declaration of Independence was not a swift, effortless sprint to immediate perfection, but rather a long, gentle journey, winding through profound challenges and inspiring triumphs across the vast expanse of generations. The document itself was a profound seed, carefully planted in the fertile yet sometimes stony soil of a new nation, destined to slowly grow, mature, and bear fruit over centuries. Its words, first spoken with measured resolve in 1776, were not an immediate decree of perfect equality for all, but an enduring promise, a moral compass designed to guide the nation's unfolding future. The most glaring contradiction, the quiet shadow that lingered persistently over the Declaration's soaring proclamation that all men are created equal, was, of course, the deeply entrenched institution of slavery. How could a nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to such self-evident truths, continue to perpetuate such a profound and dehumanizing injustice? This question, a gentle yet persistent ache in the national conscience, would become the central, agonizing struggle of America's early history. Decades later,
courageous abolitionists, with unwavering moral clarity, would gently lift the Declaration's very words from its pages, using them as a powerful moral weapon against the very system that had been preserved through painful political compromise. Figures like Frederick Douglass, with his eloquent voice and piercing intellect, would calmly remind a nation of its foundational promise, challenging it to bridge the chasm between its rhetoric and its reality, to truly live up to its highest aspirations. The journey for women's rights, too, found its quiet, profound inspiration within the spirit of the Declaration. Generations of suffragettes, speaking with calm conviction and persistent grace, would famously paraphrase its opening lines, boldly adapting them to declare that all men and women are created equal. They sought not to tear down, but to gently expand the sacred circle of liberty, to ensure that the inherent right to the pursuit of happiness was a promise afforded to all, regardless of gender. Their struggle, often marked with patient perseverance and unwavering belief in fundamental fairness, was a poignant testament to the enduring, universal power of the Declaration's foundational ideals. Even in the profound social transformations of the 20th century, during the powerful civil rights movement, the soft yet inextinguishable light of the Declaration shone through. Martin Luther King Jr., standing before thousands, his voice resonating with calm authority and moral certitude, would eloquently invoke its powerful truths, reminding a nation that it had issued a promissory note to its citizens, a sacred debt of freedom and justice owed to every individual. His words, delivered with a gentle yet firm conviction, echoed the very spirit of 1776, calling America to reach for the better angels of its nature and to fulfill the promise of true equality for all. Beyond America's borders, the Declaration's gentle influence unfurled across the globe like a quiet, inspiring breeze. It became a subtle yet powerful blueprint for countless independence movements and democratic aspirations worldwide. From the stirring cries for self-determination in Latin America, led by figures like Simón Bolívar, to the philosophical underpinnings of revolutions in Europe, nations seeking to throw off the yokes of oppression and arbitrary rule found solace and profound inspiration in its clear articulation of popular sovereignty and unalienable rights. It gently taught the world that legitimate government derived its just powers solely from the consent of the governed, a peaceful yet profoundly revolutionary paradigm shift that continues to resonate today. The Declaration, then, is not merely a static artifact of a bygone era, confined to dusty history books. It is a living document, a testament to an ongoing journey, a constant, gentle whisper that echoes through time. Its words continue to challenge each successive generation to interpret, protect, and expand the meaning of liberty, equality, and justice for all. It quietly reminds us that the pursuit of a more perfect union is a continuous, often arduous, yet always rewarding endeavor, a gentle yet persistent aspiration embedded in the very heart of the nation it helped to create. Its pages offer not just a historical account, but a serene call to ongoing contemplation and action.
As our gentle journey through the profound story of the Declaration of Independence draws to its serene close, let us pause for a moment of quiet reflection, allowing the lasting peace that resides within its historic pages to settle softly upon your mind. This remarkable document, born of meticulous thought, quiet courage, and collective will, stands not as a monument to discord or conflict,
but as an enduring testament to the universal human longing for freedom, justice, and the inherent right to self-determination. Imagine the original parchment now, a fragile yet potent piece of history, carefully preserved within the hushed, climate-controlled halls of the National Archives. It rests there, bathed in soft, filtered light, a sacred symbol. It whispers not of a violent upheaval, but of a profound intellectual awakening, a fundamental and deeply philosophical shift in the understanding of how human beings ought to be governed, moving from external imposition to internal consent. Its elegant script, though gently faded with the patient passage of time, still whispers its timeless truths with a quiet, persistent clarity. The Declaration, in its essence, reminds us that the pursuit of happiness is an inherent, unalienable right, a gentle invitation to live a life imbued with purpose, dignity, and personal contentment. It speaks of liberty, not as unbridled license or chaotic freedom, but as the serene capacity to pursue one's aspirations, to live free from undue oppression, and to flourish within a framework of justice and shared community. And it speaks most powerfully of equality, a soft yet resolute promise that every individual, regardless of their birth, their station, or their circumstance, possesses an inherent dignity and intrinsic worth that deserves unwavering respect and unwavering protection. These are not merely political doctrines, they're profound affirmations of the human spirit. In our own quiet moments, as the day gently fades into evening, we can still almost hear the faint echoes of those courageous voices from 1776. We can softly imagine the warm glow of candlelight illuminating Thomas Jefferson's careful pen, the gentle rustle of parchment as delegates debated with measured intensity, and the solemn resolve that must have filled their hearts as they affixed their signatures to a document that defined their moment and shaped the future. Their courage was not a sudden burst of defiance, but a steady inner glow, sustained by conviction and hope. The lasting legacy of the Declaration is not a loud, boisterous anthem that demands immediate attention, but rather a continuous, subtle hum beneath the surface of our collective conscience. It is a constant, subtle reminder that the ideals of liberty and equality, though sometimes challenging to fully uphold in a complex world, are worth striving for with patience, with persistent effort, and with a spirit of continuous improvement. It encourages us, in our own lives, to approach the complexities of our world with thoughtfulness, to seek understanding rather than division, and to cherish the precious freedoms that, like a calm and steady river, flow inexorably from its timeless principles. As you now allow your thoughts to drift and your senses to relax, preparing for a journey into restful slumber, let the gentle resonance of these historic words bring you a profound sense of peace. Know that the spirit of the Declaration, with its quiet strength, its eloquent vision, and its hopeful promise, continues to guide us. It is a story of human aspiration, a soothing reminder that even amidst the greatest historical storms, the quest for a better, more just, and more harmonious world can always begin with a carefully chosen word, spoken with quiet courage and beautifully preserved for all eternity. May your dreams be as serene and boundless as the ideals laid out on those historic pages, and may you awaken refreshed, carrying the quiet inspiration of liberty in your heart.